Hello again, and welcome to Become a Competent Biblical Counselor. My name is Dr. Dave Jones, and today's episode is, I think, a very, very exciting one. It's entitled Train Grandparents to Treat Depression. In other episodes, the drum in which I have been beating consistently is that we have an opportunity and should take the opportunity to train people in our churches to become biblical counselors. The Bible gives the authority and the encouragement to do so, and we just haven't done it because we just don't know how to do it. But I want to read to you an article that I found in the Journal of the American Medical Association, and it's a fascinating story, and I want to share it with you. And it starts with this. Dixon Chibanda is one of 12 psychiatrists in Zimbabwe for a population of more than 16 million. Realizing that his country would never be able to scale traditional methods of treating those with mental health issues, Chibanda helped to develop a beautiful solution powered by limitless resource, grandparents. In this extraordinary, inspirational story, you will learn more about the Friendship Bench program, which trains grandparents in evidence-based stories, biblical counseling, and brings care and hope to so many. On a warm August morning in Harare, Africa, Farai, a 24-year-old mother of two, walks towards a park bench. She looks miserable and dejected. Now, on the park bench sits an 82-year-old woman, better known to the community as Grandmother Jack. Farai hands Grandmother Jack an envelope from the clinic nurse. Grandmother Jack invites Farai to sit down as she opens the envelope and reads. There's silence for 3 minutes or so as she reads. And after a long pause, Grandmother Jack takes a deep breath, looks at Farai and says, "I'm here for you. Would you like to share your story with me?" Farai begins, her eyes swelling with tears. She says, "Grandmother Jack, I'm HIV positive. I've been living with HIV for the past 4 years. My husband left me a year ago. I have 2 kids under the age of 5. I'm unemployed, and I can hardly take care of my children." Tears are now flowing down her face, and in response, Grandmother Jack moves closer, puts her hand on Farai and says, "Farai, it's okay to cry. You've been through a lot. Would you like to share more with me?" And Farai continues, "In the last 3 weeks, I have had recurrent thoughts of killing myself, taking my 2 children with me. I can't take it anymore. The clinic nurse sent me to you. There's an exchange between the two, which lasts about 30 minutes. And finally, Grandmother Jack says, Farai, it seems to me that you have all the symptoms of confugesia." The word confugesia opens up a floodgate of tears. So fungugesia is the local equivalent of depression in my country. It literally means thinking too much. The World Health Organization estimates that more than 30 million people globally today suffer from depression, or what in my country we call confugesia. And the World Health Organization also tells us that every 40 seconds, somewhere in the world, someone commits suicide because they are unhappy, largely due to depression or confugesia. And most of these deaths are occurring in low and middle income countries. In fact, the World Health Organization goes as far as to say that when you look at the age group between 15 to 29, a leading cause of death now is actually suicide. But there are wider events that lead to depression and in some cases suicide, such as abuse, conflict, violence, isolation, loneliness. The list is endless. But one thing that we do know is that depression can be treated and suicides averted. But the problem is we just don't have enough psychiatrists or psychologists in the world to do the job. In most low and middle income countries, for instance, the ratio of psychiatrists to population is something like 1 for every 1.5 million people, which literally means that 90% of the people needing mental health services will not get it. In my country, there are 12 psychiatrists, and I am one of them, for a population of approximately 14 million. Now, let me just put that into context. One evening while I was at home, or the emergency room, from a city which is some 200 kilometers away from where I live, and the ER doctor says, one of your patients, someone you treated 4 months ago, has just taken an overdose and they are in the ER department. Hemodynamically, they seem to be okay, but they will need neuropsychiatric evaluation. Now, I obviously can't get into my car in the middle of the night and drive 200 kilometers, so at best as we could, over the phone with the ER doctor, we come up with an assessment. We ensure that suicidal observations are in place. We ensure that we start reviewing the antidepressants that this patient has been taking, and we finally conclude that as soon as Erica, that was her name, 26-year-old, as soon as Erica is ready to be released from the ER, she should come directly to me with her mother, and I will evaluate and establish what can be done. And we assumed that that would take about a week. A week passes, 3 weeks pass, no Erica. And one day I get a call from Erica's mother, and she says, Erica committed suicide 3 days ago. She hanged herself from the mango tree in the family garden. Now, almost like a knee-jerk reaction, I couldn't help but ask, but why didn't you come to Harare, where I live? We had agreed that as soon as you were released from the ER, you will come to me. Her response was brief. We didn't have the $15 bus fare to come to Harare. Now, suicide is not an unusual event in the world of mental health, but there was something about Erica's death that struck me at the core of my every being. That statement from Erica's mother, we didn't have $15 bus fare to come to you, made me realize that it just wasn't going to work, me expecting people to come to me. And I got into this state of soul-searching, trying to really discover my role as a psychiatrist in Africa. And after considerable consultation and soul-searching, talking to colleagues, friends, and family, it suddenly dawned on me that actually one of the most reliable sources we have in Africa are grandparents. Yes, grandparents. And I thought grandparents are in every community. There are hundreds of them. And if they don't leave their communities in search of greater pastures. See, the only time they leave is when they go to a greener pasture called heaven. So, I thought, how about training grandparents in evidence-based biblical counseling, which they deliver on a bench? Empower them with the skills to listen, to show empathy, all of that rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy, parentheses, biblical counseling, close parentheses, empower them with the skills to provide behavior activation, activity scheduling, and support them with digital technology. You know, mobile phone technology. Pretty much everyone in Africa has a mobile phone today. So in 2006, I started my first group of grandparents. Today, there are hundreds of grandparents who are working in more than 70 communities. And in the last year alone, more than 30,000 people received treatment on the friendship bench from a grandparent in a community in Zimbabwe. And recently we published this work that is done by these grandparents in the Journal of the American Medical Association. And our results show that 6 months after receiving treatment from a grandparent, people were still symptom-free. No depression, suicidal ideation, completely reduced. In fact, our results, this was a clinical trial. In fact, this clinical trial showed that grandmothers and grandfathers were more effective at treating depression than doctors. And so, we're now working toward expanding this program. There are more than 600 million people currently aged above 65 in the world. And by the year 2050, there will be 1.5 billion people aged 65 and above. Imagine if we could create a global network of grandparents in every major city in the world who are trained in evidence-based biblical counseling, supported through digital platforms, networked. And they will make a difference in communities. They will reduce the treatment gap for mental, neurological, and substance use disorders. So, Farai had 6 sessions on the bench with Grandmother Jack. Today, Farai is employed. She has her 2 children at school. And as for Grandmother Jack, one morning in February, we expected her to see her 257th client on the bench. She didn't show up. She had gone to a greener pasture called heaven. But I believe that Grandmother Jack, from up there, she's cheering on all the other grandparents. The increasing number of grandparents who are making a difference in the lives of thousands of people. And I'm sure she's in awe when she realizes that something that she helped to pioneer is now spreading to other countries like Malawi, the island of Zanzibar, and coming closer to home here in the United States in the city of New York. May her soul rest in peace. So there you have it. That's what biblical counseling is all about that I'm trying to promote. We have people, hundreds and thousands of people sitting in our pews in our churches that are ready to take on this kind of a ministry. This is what biblical counseling is all about, using people in the church community to heal the church community, people with life stories who have realized God's mercy and grace to serve those experiencing similar life struggles, a true and honorable service to serve a living God by the discipling of God's people to be competent biblical counselors. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you later.